There, do you ever struggle with things like anxiety or depression, or maybe you've been diagnosed with ADHD, or you notice some things like brain fog or mental fatigue or forgetfulness sort of showing up as you get older, or maybe you're concerned about dementia or Alzheimer's disease, maybe you have a family history there, and you're wanting to support the brain. And all of these things have one thing in common that I think we need to be aware of, and that is a pattern of brain inflammation. So let's talk about that today. I'm Michelle. I'm a functional nutrition practitioner, a clinical herbalist, and I work with a lot of clients from around the world to support these brain type of symptoms like anxiety and depression. I've helped clients come off of mood medications, improve sleep. And I do that because I'm also a biology of trauma advanced provider and have mentored with some of the top professionals in the field of trauma and nervous system biology. And I can tell you, it's such a profound place to start in working with clients who often have a lot of complex or chronic issues showing up in their body, not just related to the brain, but maybe immune dysfunction or a hormone imbalance or gut issues, right? They actually are all related. And of course, inflammation is often at the root of these chronic patterns that show up for so many people today. And brain inflammation specifically is what I want to talk about today because all of those symptoms that I mentioned earlier, they have brain inflammation in common. If we understand that and we know how to address the brain inflammation, it can make a huge difference in helping your clients or yourself to move forward because when the brain is inflamed, it impacts our neurotransmitter function and our ability to stay regulated and our nervous system response. A person who has an inflamed brain is much more likely to find themselves stuck in that chronic freeze pattern of the nervous system. And it's so hard to move forward, make good decisions around your diet, around movement, around everything in your life when you're stuck in that chronic freeze pattern and you're feeling down, depressed, anxious, having trouble sleeping. So, working to support the nervous system biology by addressing brain inflammation, I think, is one of the most important and valuable places to start for anyone, again, who's struggling with really any kind of chronic symptoms. So let's talk about how to look at brain inflammation. How do you know if you have it? What might cause brain inflammation? And I want to share with you a few uh, herbs that I really think are powerful in addressing brain inflammation. And I want you to stay till the end as well, because I want to share with you what is probably the most common cause of brain inflammation for most people. So let's dive into that. First of all, we've talked about some of these symptoms that show up when you have brain inflammation, anxiety, depression, trouble focusing, brain fog, that feeling like the brain shuts down after you maybe have been online for a while or reading a book, and all of a sudden you just can't stay focused. Your brain feels really tired. These all point to symptoms of brain inflammation. And again, over time, this causes damage to the neurons of the brain and can lead to degenerative brain diseases, right? Like dementia and Alzheimer's disease, which of course we all want to avoid. So keeping that brain healthy and addressing brain inflammation is a really important piece of the picture. One of the reasons why I think it's so valuable to start by addressing brain inflammation in my clients is that it can impact our ability to make neurotransmitters, right? Those feel good chemicals in the brain that, if we're low in serotonin, for example, we might feel down and depressed or have trouble sleeping. And a lot of people also have cravings for sugar or other addictive type of behaviors that can show up if they have low serotonin or dopamine or GABA, for example. We often reach for coping mechanisms like food or other substances to bring the body back into that place of regulation when our nervous system is dysregulated. And so these are all to me signs of a brain that is inflamed. Okay, now causes can be anything from a traumatic brain injury, right? I've worked with many clients who have had some kind of an injury, a car accident, and that was the priming event for them of brain inflammation. But it can just be long-term stress, emotional stress, and trauma as well that we have actually found create inflammation in the brain as well. They shift these pathways of how our brain functions, and we start to see these symptoms of brain inflammation showing up. Things like toxins and pathogens can actually play a role here as well. So I think it can be really important to look at what might be causing brain inflammation. And of course, it can be more than one thing, but that can really help to know where to put some attention and addressing what's causing the brain inflammation so we can address that. And of course, I want to share with you in a moment what I think is probably one of the biggest triggers of brain inflammation. But we really want to root out that cause of brain inflammation first. So there might be something we can do there. If we know it's a toxin, there are some things that we can do to remove that toxin, right, from maybe the diet or from the body using detoxification methods. But we also want to think about now that the brain has been basically exposed to inflammation, it's been primed, if you will, for inflammation. It's more susceptible to becoming inflamed. So those secondary insults, whether that's eating foods like gluten or food additives in some cases that can also create brain inflammation, like glutamine would be an example there. And we want to remove those from the diet, of course, because they are just contributing to this ongoing chronic inflammation in the brain that then creates the patterns of anxiety, depression, brain fog, and all of the things we've talked about. So we want to assess those root causes, but then we want to do what we can to dial down and address that inflammation. And here is where I think herbal medicine can really shine because we can bring in herbal support that has been shown in research to actually shift pathways of brain inflammation back into more positive pathways and help a person to recover right from brain inflammation symptoms. So there are so many herbs we could actually talk about in this category. And most of these herbs are known as nootropic herbs, which just means they support brain health. They help with memory, cognition, they help support repair of the brain. And I want to talk about just a couple of my favorite nootropic herbs that I use with a lot of clients to support brain inflammation. The first one being lion's mane mushroom. And there's been actually a lot of research done on this mushroom and how it's been used to support all kinds of symptoms of brain inflammation. I was just looking at some of the research before I came on just to review, and I was just amazed at how much research actually there is out there that's showing that lion's mane is, of course, a nootropic. It has neuroprotective effects. It helps to protect against depression and anxiety. And there's a number of ways that it does this, but a couple of things that it does. It number one helps to promote myelin genesis or the synthesis, if you will, of myelin, right? That fatty white layer that protects the nerve cells, right? It's really important that we have a healthy myelin that's on those nerve cells because they help to with the signals that are sent through the nerves, right? They help to with that process. And if we have good, healthy myelin, we have good nerve signaling. Our nerves are working well, basically. And so, this is one way that lion's mane mushroom helps to protect our brain and our nervous system. And I also was looking at some research that shows how lion's mane mushroom increases something called nerve growth factor. And it's also known to promote BDNF levels, which are brain-derived neurotrophic factors, right? And this is a really important substance in the brain that helps to enhance our abilities, the ability of our neurons to grow and change, something we call neuron plasticity. And it's really important in recovering from brain inflammation, right? And so really a valuable herb here. I was looking at one study from 2010 where they used lion's mane in menopausal women, and it showed that it reduced both depression and anxiety and helped with cognitive impairment. Also, in another study, when it was combined with some other nootropics like Bacopa and Gotu Kola. So, this is a really valuable herb and one that is really dear to my heart. I know several years ago when I was going through a stressful time and having trouble sleeping, was having some anxiety, and it was even impacting my day-to-day work and being able to stay focused and present in what I was doing. And I started using lion's mane actually at that time for the first time. And I was really amazed. I mean, I needed a lot of help, but it really made a lot of difference in my ability to sleep better, to stay calm, to stay focused. And so I can tell you from experience that this is a really powerful and really exciting a nootropic herb that we have at our disposal to help ourselves or our clients to support those symptoms of brain inflammation, dial down things like anxiety, depression, stay focused, and even sleep better. One thing I want to mention about lion's mane that I've always found really interesting is that it is also shown to be protective against some of the bacteria that can cause like acid reflux or ulcers in the stomach, which we know is H. pylori, of course. And so it has some antimicrobial impact as well. And I think it's really interesting. We know, of course, that that gut-brain axis plays an important role in uh, dialing down the inflammation that is stemming from the gut that's impacting the brain. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on that topic today, but definitely we know from the research that there's a definite correlation between inflammation in the gut and in the brain. And so lion's mane can be really valuable in this situation in dialing down inflammation that's stemming from the gut. So a really interesting and really amazing herbal support we have. But the other herb I want to talk about as well is one that's really popular in Ayurvedic tradition, and that's Bacopa. And this is just another one of our really amazing and lovely nootropic herbs. It increases cerebral circulation and it can be really useful for things like anxiety, ADHD, or head trauma injuries. And again, it helps with focus and cognitive function. And one way it's believed to work is by enhancing cholinergic function and preventing stress-induced inhibition of that brain-derived neurotropic factor we were talking about. So stress is something that can inhibit our production or action of BDNF in the brain. And here's something, Bacoba, that actually will prevent that inhibition of BDNF. So we have good, healthy levels of BDNF. That means our brain can grow and change in useful and healthy ways, and we can recover from stressful events that impact our brain health. So again, really lovely herb for treating things like anxiety, ADHD, for mood and memory. It is truly one of the most powerful herbs I think we have in this category. And it's been used again in Ayurvedic tradition for a long time. It's known as Brahmi in some circles. And that term Brahmi is really referring to it being an herb of great value and of wisdom. And so I always think of Bacopa when I'm working with clients who are struggling with any type of brain inflammation pattern, especially if I suspect they have low circulation to the brain. And one way I might know that is if they get cold hands and feet a lot. That can be a sign that they have poor circulation, and that means that blood may not be getting to the brain optimally either. So these herbs that help enhance cerebral circulation, like Bacopa, can be really valuable in this instance. But I did mention as well, there's one big trigger for brain inflammation that I think for a lot of people could maybe be the most common, and that is an imbalance in our blood sugar. So when blood sugar is elevated, it creates this inflammatory situation really throughout the body, but it's definitely going to impact the brain. And that's true as well when our blood sugar is low. This is actually a big problem because our brain needs glucose for energy. And it's why a lot of people can feel shaky or brain fog or even pass out, right? If we don't get enough glucose to the brain, if our blood sugar drops too low. So, blood sugar is really a big piece of the puzzle here because we live in a society where a lot of people are eating, higher carbohydrate diets that impact their blood sugar levels in negative ways. And so addressing that can be really valuable. And I do want to say it doesn't all come down to just eating a healthy diet. Sometimes there are other factors that are impacting our ability to regulate our blood glucose response. And so maybe something to look at, looking at some of those markers of blood sugar balance, like your fasting glucose, fasting insulin, maybe even an HbA1c as well, to see how well is your body keeping your blood glucose regulated, because it can play a really important role in keeping the brain healthy. In fact, some researchers are now calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes because of this, because we know that this dysregulation in blood sugar over time can really impact your ability to maintain brain health. It's interesting to me, though, as we kind of back up and talk about neurotransmitter function. And I mentioned how many people with low neurotransmitter function might be craving sugar and carbs and maybe other substances like alcohol as well, which can have an impact on the brain. And so it's like a catch-22 at that point, right? If you find yourself really craving carbs or sugar, and it's driving that pattern of brain inflammation, it becomes this vicious cycle. This is actually where a lot of our plant medicine support can be really valuable as well, because in addition to addressing brain inflammation, many of our nootropics and nervine herbs can help with supporting neurotransmitter function. And I've seen them work really well to help with clients who are struggling with cravings, right? Cravings for carbs or sugar. So we need to get in and break that cycle somewhere. And herbs can be really valuable in helping people who are kind of struggling with this pattern of brain inflammation, cravings, eating the wrong foods, continuing to create that cycle of inflammation, and just, it's ongoing unless we get in there and really shift that cycle. And that's where herbal support can be so valuable in helping clients to do that. It's like we bring in our herbs to just uh, bring in support where we need it, where we might not be able in our own ability to resource our body to make better choices, to find that regulation, that focus to do the right things, make the right choices. Herbs can be so valuable in that case. So I hope this is really helpful for you in understanding why brain inflammation is such an important area to assess in your clients or with yourself if you're working on your own health patterns, and why it can be multifaceted. But I've got some resources to help you get started and dig down further into this. So you'll find those in the description below. And if you are a holistic health practitioner who does work with clients or patients to support brain health or mood or disordered eating, I've got a link below to a free class called Mastering Botanical Medicine for Health Professionals that I'd love to invite you to, where I'll show you more in depth how to use botanical medicine to support your clients on their healing journey. See you next time.